I know many of you listen to these stories as you fall asleep. Before you drift off, it'd be grateful if you do leave a comment telling me where you're listening from tonight. If you're enjoying the journey, please consider liking and subscribing. It truly supports this channel. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that this story involves real people and real loss. We share these accounts not for entertainment, but to honor those who were lost and to perhaps help others recognize signs that could prevent future tragedies. For the best experience, you might lower your volume just a little enough to let the narration guide you gently towards sleep. Now, please get comfortable. And let's begin tonight's first story. This isn't an easy tale, but sometimes the darkest narratives remind us how fragile our world can be. This is the story of Bruce Sparty and the night that shattered the quiet community of Covina, California. Take a slow breath. It happened on Christmas Eve, 2008, and like so many true accounts, the roots reach back long before that horrific evening. Bruce Jeffrey Party was born March 23, 1963, in Los Angeles. By all appearances, he was a bright child. His father was an engineer, and Bruce seemed set to follow that path. He graduated from John H. Francis Polytechnic High School and later earned a computer science degree from California State University, Northridge. Those who knew the younger Bruce recalled someone charismatic, funny, outgoing. At his college graduation, he crossed the stage carrying an inflatable doll just to get a laugh. That was his personality. Sharp, clever, the sort who could energize a room. After university, he landed what seemed a dream position at the renowned Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Locke, and at Flintridge. For a young engineer, it was a pinnacle, but beneath that engaging surface, fractures were forming. Small ones at first, easy to miss unless you looked closely. In the 1980 seconds, Bruce became engaged to a woman named Deanna. They set a wedding date for June 1989. Here's where things turned strange. Deanna paid for everything, the entire wedding, draining her savings to the last cent. Bruce contributed nothing. When the day arrived, Deanna stood at the altar alone. Bruce never appeared. He was unreachable. No explanation. Weeks later, he resurfaced. It turned out he'd taken Deanna's last $3. Zaro and used it to fund a solo trip to Palm Springs. He simply walked away as if it meant nothing. That tells you something about Bruce, how he valued others. How easily he could vanish when situations grew difficult. Years passed. Bruce moved on. In the early 2000 seconds, he met a woman named Elena Lucero, and they began an on-again, off-again relationship. They had a son together, a beautiful little boy who should have known a normal, happy childhood. But when the boy was just over a year old, something occurred. One day, Elena left Bruce watching their son while she went to the store a 8-week errand. Maybe 45 minutes. When she returned, she found Bruce frantically holding their unconscious toddler. The child had gotten into the backyard pool. Somehow, Bruce hadn't noticed. By the time he found him, it was too late. They rushed the boy to the hospital. He survived, but oxygen deprivation had caused severe, irreversible brain damage. That little boy would spend his life in a wheelchair, requiring constant care. He was only 13 months old. Elena later sued Bruce's homeowner's insurance for $100 to cover medical costs and establish a special needs trust. According to Elena's attorney, Bruce was consumed by guilt afterward. But here is the detail that lingers. After the settlement was finalized in August 2002, Bruce cut off all contact. He never saw his son again, never saw Elena again. He simply vanished from their lives. And he never told a soul about what happened, not even the woman who would become his next wife. In 2004, Bruce met Sylvia Ortega. She was 43, warm, family-oriented. Her best friend would later describe her as kind, generous, the type of person who brightened your world. Bruce and Sylvia married. For a short while, things may have seemed steady, but the marriage was troubled from the start. Bruce insisted on keeping everything separate: bank accounts, finances. He resisted blending their lives. Sylvia confided in her best friend that he changed after the wedding. Distant, cold. It didn't feel like love. Then Sylvia discovered the truth through Bruce's own mother, who had grown increasingly dismayed by her son's behavior. Sylvia learned about the child Bruce had concealed from her, the son with brain damage. Worse, She learned Bruce had been dodging child support payments while still claiming the boy as a dependent on his taxes to collect the benefit. He was profiting from a child he had abandoned. That was the breaking point for Sylvia. She could not stay with someone capable of that level of deception, that brand of cruelty toward his own son. In March 2008, they separated. Sylvia moved back in with her parents, Joseph and Alicia Ortega, into their two-story home on Noel Drive in Covina. The divorce proceedings grew bitter. Bruce was ordered to pay Dolores $785 monthly in spousal support. He complained to the court that Sylvia lived rent-free with her parents while spending money on a luxury car, trips to Las Vegas, expensive meals, spa treatments, golf lessons. He resented every cent. Then, in July 2008, Bruce was fired from his job at ITD Corporation. His employer discovered he had been fraudulently billing clients for hours he did not work. Suddenly, Bruce had no income. The court suspended his spousal support payments due to financial hardship. But when the divorce was finalized on December 18, just 1 week before Christmas, Bruce still owed Sylvia Dolores $10,000 as part of the settlement. She also kept her wedding ring and the family dog. For Bruce, this was not just about money. It was about control, about losing, about being exposed as someone who had failed caught lying, unable to keep a job or a marriage intact. From what investigators later pieced together, that rage and humiliation had been simmering for months. He began plotting something terrible. In September 2008, 3 months before the attack, Bruce walked into a costume shop less than 2 miles from his home. The owner, a seamstress named Jerry Tita, remembered him clearly. He ordered a custom-made Santa Claus suit, but not just any suit. He wanted it extra large, oversized, bigger than he was. That's what triggered it for me, Jerry would later tell reporters. Because I heard on the news that he carried guns inside. Bruce told her he needed it for a holiday party in early November. He wanted to look extra jolly. He said the suit cost Dolores $300. Jerry made it to his specifications and didn't think of it again until she saw the news that Christmas. What she didn't know was that Bruce was planning to look jolly. He was planning to conceal weapons beneath that oversized costume. At his home in Montrose, Bruce began assembling an arsenal. He purchased 5 9 handguns. He bought 2 shotguns. He obtained high-octane racing fuel. He built what investigators later described as a homemade flame harbor, a modified rolling air compressor designed to spray fuel. He gift-wrapped it in festive paper so it would resemble a Christmas present. He rented multiple cars. He packed one with supplies, a computer, water, food, maps of the southwestern United States and Mexico. He parked that car near the home of Scott Nord, Sylvia's divorce attorney. Investigators believe Bruce planned to kill him. 2. He purchased a plane ticket for a Christmas morning flight from Los Angeles to Moline, Illinois. He intended to visit a friend in Iowa, perhaps to start over somewhere new. He strapped Dolores $17,000 in cash to his body, hidden beneath his clothes. This was not an impulsive act of rage. It was calculated, methodical. He had been planning for months. Christmas Eve, 2008. The Ortega family gathered at Joseph and Alicia's home on Noel Drive. About 25 to 30 people were their siblings, spouses, nieces, nephews, grandchildren. Adults were in the dining room playing poker, laughing, enjoying the holiday. Kids were in the back of the house playing video games. 17-year-old Michael Ortiz was upstairs on the computer. It was warm, loud, and full of life, the kind of Christmas Eve everyone anticipates. A night that should hold only joy and connection. Around 11:30 p.m. An 8-year-old girl saw someone walking up the driveway. He was dressed as Santa Claus and carrying presents. Her eyes must have sparkled. Santa was here. She ran to the door, excited, and opened it. Bruce shot her in the face. The little girl collapsed, blood streaming from her cheek. Then Bruce stepped inside and began firing, shooting at anything that moved. Sylvia, her parents, her siblings, their spouses. He targeted everyone. He was there to talk or negotiate. He was there to kill them all. When he ran out of ammunition, he unwrapped one of his presents and pulled out the homemade flame harbor. He began spraying racing fuel around the living room, coating everything in accelerant. The plan was to ignite it with a flare and burn the house down with everyone inside. But there was an open flame somewhere, perhaps a candle, perhaps the fireplace. The fuel ignited prematurely. An explosion erupted. The house burst into flames. Bruce was caught in the blast. His arms, legs, and the back of his neck were engulfed in fire. Third-degree burns. The polyester pants of his Santa suit melted into his skin. He was in agony, but he still managed to stumble out of the house. He peeled off what he could of the costume. Some of it remained fused to his burned flesh, and got into his rental car. One of the survivors, a woman named Letitia, reached a neighbor's house with her husband and 8-year-old daughter. She called 911 and identified Bruce despite the costume, the beard, the disguise. "I have a feeling I know who it is," she told the dispatcher. "They're going through a divorce right now." It took 80 firefighters an hour and a half to bring the blaze under control. When they finally entered, they found bodies charred beyond recognition. Some victims had to be identified through dental records. 9 people died that night. Sylvia Ortega Party, age 43. Her mother, Alicia Ada Ortega, 70. Her father, Joseph S. Ortega, 79th. Her brother, Charles Ortega, 50, and his wife, Sherry Lynn Ortega, 45th. Her brother, James Ortega, 52, and his wife, Teresa, 52nd. Her sister, Alicia Ortega Ortiz, 46th, and her 17-year-old nephew, Michael Andre Ortiz, who had been trapped upstairs. 3 others were injured, including the little girl who opened the door. She survived, but her face was severely damaged. 13 children were orphaned that night. Others lost one parent. An entire family was decimated in minutes. Bruce drove 40 miles to his brother's house in Sylmar. His brother washed home. Bruce broke in. He was in such pain from the burns that he likely knew he wouldn't survive. He called him go to a hospital. They'd arrest him on sight. He called him flee to Mexico or Illinois. Not in his condition. So Bruce did what cowards do. He put a gun to the roof of his mouth and pulled the trigger. His brother found him around 3:30 in the morning. Christmas Day. Bruce was dead. The toxicology report later revealed cocaine in his bloodstream. Another secret Bruce had concealed. Police discovered fragments of the Santa costume in Bruce's rented vehicle, parked just around the corner. He had engineered it to explode. Disturbing the suit would ignite a fire and set off hundreds of rounds of ammunition. When the bomb disposal unit attempted to deactivate it, the car was consumed by a blast. Fortunately, there were no injuries. At Bruce's residence in Montrose, detectives uncovered what they termed a functional bomb assembly workshop. Empty packaging for the 5 pistols, the shotguns, canisters for the high-grade fuel. Every detail was carefully orchestrated. They also located that second rental car, the one he had left near the home of Scott Nord, the divorce lawyer. It was stocked with provisions for an extended trip. Maps, non-crescenta food, water. Bruce had intended to kill Scott as well, likely using a similar method, but the blaze at the Ortega residence had left him so severely injured he was unable to execute the remainder of his scheme. So what was the motive? That is the question everyone continues to ask. Why would an individual commit such an act? Federal investigators later developed a psychological profile of Bruce. They concluded he likely suffered from severe narcissistic personality disorder and obsessive-compulsive tendencies. He could not tolerate defeat, could not bear exposure, could not accept that others perceived his true nature a charlatan, a deceiver, a man who had forsaken his own disabled son and then attempted to monetize that tragedy. To Bruce, the divorce was not merely a legal process. It was a personal repudiation, a profound humiliation, a public declaration of his failure. And instead of accepting accountability, instead of transforming himself, instead of acknowledging that his choices carried repercussions, he elected to annihilate everything. If he could not possess Sylvia, if he could not have the existence he desired, then no one else would either. Christmas symbolizes family, affection, unity. For someone like Bruce, who had devoted his life to evading his shortcomings. Such a celebration must have been intolerable. He obliterated it because he sought to strip away what Sylvia cherished most. Her family, Sylvia's closest friend, Rox and Jarrett, addressed the media following the tragedy. She had known Sylvia for 3 decades. She had nearly attended the Christmas Eve gathering. She had received an invitation, but her parents were visiting and wished to attend a midnight service, so she remained home. "It's chilling," Roxanne stated, "because I don't believe we would have had an opportunity to escape." She recalled sharing a meal with Sylvia mere days before the assault. They raised a glass to Sylvia's new beginning, her fresh start, her liberation from Bruce. When Sylvia first met Bruce 2 years prior, Roxanne explained he seemed like a decent match, but after the marriage, he was simply not the same man. He changed. His entire demeanor shifted. She never truly felt he loved her. He showed no genuine care. He wanted everything kept separate. He never truly wished to merge their lives. The divorce, Roxanne said, ultimately centered on finances. Bruce refused to pay, not a single cent. That was his attitude throughout the marriage as well. And for money, for pride, for a wounded ego, 9 people lost their lives. An 8-year-old girl was shot in the face. 13 children were orphaned. A grandmother and grandfather, celebrating what should have been a festive holiday with their family, were murdered in their own home. There is an aspect of this case that lingers. Perhaps it is the timing. Christmas Eve, a night intended for peace and goodwill. Perhaps it is the sheer cruelty done in the guise of Santa Claus. The symbol children associate with delight and presents, and perverting it into a to-love horror. Perhaps it is the image of the young girl opening the door, anticipating wonder, and instead confronting a monster. Or perhaps it is the stark reminder that those who perpetrate such atrocities often blend seamlessly into the background. Bruce had no prior criminal record, no history of violence. To his neighbors, he was merely a man in a Santa suit heading to a party. They had no conception of his capacity for evil. The house on Noel Rest Drive remained a charred husk for weeks after the attack. A spontaneous memorial emerged outside. Flowers, candles, photographs of the victims. The community of Cabernet held candlelight vigils. They established the Ortega Family Fund to aid the survivors. Yet nothing could restore those 9 lives. Nothing could erase the trauma of that night. In a bizarre, twisted irony, Bruce's own body thwarted him. Had the Santa suit not ignited, had he not been so critically burned, investigators believe he would have proceeded to kill Scott Nord, and potentially even his own mother. The fire, the very instrument he selected to inflict maximum devastation, ultimately prevented him from causing even greater destruction. But it was too late for the Ortegas. Too late for Sylvia, who had just embarked on her new life. Too late for her parents, who were in their golden years and should have had more time with their grandchildren. Too late for Michael, only 17, with his entire future ahead of him. So what remains for us? What lesson can be drawn from a narrative such as this? I believe it is a caution that anger, if left to fester, can devour everything. That narcissism, the incapacity to see beyond one's own injured vanity, can morph a person into something monstrous. That the individuals we trust, the people we welcome into our lives, can harbor a darkness we never perceive until it is too late. But it is also a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. The survivors of that night, like the young girl who was shot, like Letitia and her family who escaped, carry those scars permanently. Yet they endure, they persevere, and the memory of the Ortega family lives on through them, through those who love them. Through accounts like this one, take a slow breath, allow your shoulders to release their tension. This story has now concluded. Bruce is gone. The terror of that night in Cabernet belongs to the past. But we remember. We remember because those 9 individuals deserved a better fate. They deserved to finish their card game, to unwrap gifts on Christmas morning, to embrace their children and grandchildren and tell them they were loved. They deserve to live. And in remembering them, we honor that. We honor the light they brought into the world, even as we recognize the darkness that extinguished it. If this is your first time listening to one of our true crime narratives, welcome to Tranquil Crime Chronicles, where we examine these cases with a calm and respectful approach. I also wish to take a moment to express gratitude to my wonderful subscribers who have been journeying with me. Thank you for your ongoing support. If you are still listening, please feel free to leave a comment. Share where you are tuning in from in the current time in your part of the world, or simply say hello to let me know you're here. And if you haven't already, please like this recording and subscribe so you don't miss our next true crime stories for restful listening. Now, let's proceed to our second account, Story 2. Tonight, we will discuss a case that deeply affected a small community in Iowa. A story about a vibrant young girl, a town that refused to surrender hope, and a search for truth that lasted longer than anyone anticipated. This is the story of Braylon Terrell. Before we start, I want you to know this narrative does involve challenging subjects, but I will relate it gently, the way you might hear it from a friend over a cup of coffee, with respect for all involved. So, just breathe, settle in, and listen. It was the summer of 2020, July in Iowa. You know that kind of summer heat where the air feels heavy and the world seems to move at a slower pace. Children were on summer break, riding bicycles, playing video games, savoring every moment before school resumed and beyond. In Davenport, a city along the Mississippi River, 10-year-old Braylon Terrell was doing what most children her age do during summer vacation. She adored TikTok. Like so many kids, she would create short dance videos with her mother, Aisha Langford, always beaming. Her family and friends would tell you that Braylon had a radiant personality, the kind of child who illuminated a room simply by entering it. She was also a big sister, a role she took seriously. Her younger half-brother, whom we'll refer to as the J to protect his privacy, admired her. They would play together, sing songs like Ring Around the Rosie. Simply being children, Braylon was compassionate, imaginative, always eager to make people laugh. She stood 4 feet 5 inches tall, weighed about 75 pounds, petite for her age, with memorable dark hair. She had brown eyes and a smile that, as one family friend described it, you noticed wherever she went. On Thursday, July 9, 2020, Braylon was excited. She was going to spend the night at her half-brother DJ's place. DJ was staying with his father, Henry Earl Dinkins, and Dinkins' girlfriend, Maria Coulter, at their apartment in the 2700 block of East 53rd Street in Davenport. Henry Dinkins was 48 years old at the time. He was DJ's biological father, and although he and Braylon's mother, Aisha Langford, were no longer together, they shared custody of their son. Braylon and DJ were half-siblings through their mother, and the children adored spending time together. That evening, everything appeared ordinary. The children were playing video games in the bedroom, laughing, enjoying themselves the way kids do on a summer night when there's no early morning ahead. Around 9 or 10 o'clock that night, Braylon borrowed Dinkins' phone to text her mother. "Good night, Mom," she typed. Moments later, Aisha replied, "Good night. I love you, Braylon." "Thank you." Those would be the final words Braylon ever sent to her mother. Maria Coulter, Dinkins' girlfriend, stated she went to bed around 11:30 that night. The children were still awake, still engaged in their games. Everything seemed fine, normal, just another summer night. But when Maria woke around 3:00 a.m. to use the bathroom, she immediately sensed something was wrong. Braylon was not in the bed, and as Maria scanned the apartment, she realized both Braylon and Dinkins were absent. She felt it and heard of that nauseating sensation, that immediate certainty that something was amiss. Where could they have gone at 3:00 in the morning? Why would Dinkins take Braylon anywhere at that hour? Then, approximately 30 minutes later, Dinkins returned to the apartment alone, and Rhea watched from the bedroom window as he went to a closet to retrieve something. Though she couldn't discern what it was, and that's when she saw Braylon standing outside near Dinkins' maroon Chevrolet Impala. And Rhea could see her clearly because of Braylon's distinctive hair, and because of the oversized shirt she wore, a 4XL t-shirt that Dinkins had given both children to sleep in, which nearly swallowed Braylon's small frame. Moments later, Dinkins and Braylon departed again, and then silence. When Dinkins returned sometime after sunrise, He was alone. Braylon was nowhere to be found. Friday morning, July 10th, began like any other morning for Asia Langford. She was scheduled to work at the Checkers restaurant on Locust Street, and her manager texted her early, asking if she could assist with opening. She brushed her teeth, hurried out the door, and arrived at work at 8 a.m. 4 minutes later, her world began to collapse. Dinkins called her. He told her he had woken up and Braylon was missing. Simply gone. He said he was going downtown to file a police report, but he never did. Instead, Asia was the one who contacted the Davenport Police Department at 8 that morning, reporting her daughter missing. Her 10-year-old daughter, who had spent the night at her ex-partner's apartment and had somehow vanished between the hours of darkness and dawn. The police responded promptly. They began searching Credit Island, a park area near where Braylon was last seen. They spoke with Enria. They talked to young DJ, who was only 8 years old, confused and frightened about where his sister had gone. As the investigation stretched from hours into days, the Davenport Police Department committed its full resources. This was clearly not a case of a simple disappearance. Sergeant Jeffrey Pfeiffer, among the initial responders, would later state the evidence conclusively indicated Brakia did not leave on her own. This was something far more sinister. By July 14th, for days after Brakia vanished, police formally identified Henry Dinkins as a person of interest. He was yet labeled a suspect, but authorities had numerous pressing questions. Dinkins had a prior record. In 1990, at age 17, he was convicted of third-degree sexual abuse involving a girl under 14. He was a registered sex offender and had recently breached his registration terms on July 10th. The exact day Brakia disappeared, Dinkins was booked that day for probation and registration violations. Police began reconstructing his movements that night, uncovering a deeply troubling sequence of events. Let's follow the trail as investigators did. At 3:31 a.m. on July 10th, surveillance footage captured Dinkins exiting his maroon 2007 Chevrolet Impala at a convenience store on West 53rd Street. His vehicle was then recorded on multiple cameras traveling north toward Clinton County, eventually seen within Clinton, Iowa, roughly a 30-minute drive from Davenport. After 7:00 a.m., more footage showed him at a Clinton Walmart purchasing 2 bottles of bleach. A subsequent search of the Impala revealed the empty bleach cartons. Upon opening the trunk, detectives were met with a potent, unmistakable odor of bleach. Inside, they discovered an axe. A crime scene technician, using a blue light on the axe's metal head, observed a substance consistent with blood. The car had also been recorded on Highway 30 near 400th Avenue. During a grid search there, an officer found a cell phone, its battery, and a case discarded by the roadside. Later, a young witness, D, would tell investigators he was in the car with his father and found the phone with its battery removed. He stated he reinserted the battery and powered the phone on briefly. Further court documents revealed Dinkins had crashed his vehicle into a ditch on Highway 61 in Clinton County around 4:30 a.m. A man named Jared Brink stopped to assist. When questioned later, Brink said he didn't know what was in the car but recalled the location a proximity that would become critically important months later. The community mobilized in force. Hundreds of volunteers combed fields and roadsides. Brakia's family created mobiles, vehicles adorned with her photo and packed with flyers, distributing them everywhere. An Amber Alert was issued. On July 15th, the FBI joined the investigation, offering a dual arrest and Zorro reward and contributing technical resources. The case was featured on national television. Time passed. Brakia's 11th birthday on December 4th, 2020, came and went. The FBI's Omaha office tweeted a birthday message, pleading for information. There were no answers, only anguish and the mother's relentless dread. She's out there somewhere, Aisha told reporters. When she's home safe, that's when the story begins. That's when she'll tell us what happened. She clung to hope that her daughter was alive. Winter gave way to spring. On March 22nd, 2021, to fishermen near DeWitt, Iowa, in a remote part of Clinton County, discovered human remains in a secluded, vegetated pond. The area was difficult to access, with a steep, undrivable approach. Criminal investigators spent the next day meticulously recovering the remains. On March 31st, Davenport Police Chief Paul Sikorsky delivered the heartbreaking confirmation. The remains were those of Berezier Darrell. The 9-month search had ended in tragedy. This was now a homicide investigation. The medical examiner's report was devastating. Berezier had been shot multiple times. At least 2 gunshot wounds were identified, with a 3rd projectile found in her hair. The oversized Fraxel E-shirt she wore to bed was located near her. In April, detectives personally delivered these findings to her mother, Aisha Langford. On May 5th, 2021, Scott County Attorney Mike Colton announced charges. Henry Earl Dinkins was charged with first-degree murder and first-degree kidnapping. While announcing charges is a significant step, Walton stated, "It is just the beginning of the legal process." Dinkins pleaded not guilty on June 16, initiating a complex legal journey. He initially represented himself, repeatedly requested new attorneys, and successfully moved for a change of venue due to pretrial publicity. However, on August 8, 2023, the day jury selection was to begin, Dinkins made a surprising choice. He waived his right to a jury trial, opting for a bench trial where a judge would decide the verdict. This moved the case back to Scott County under Judge Henry Latham. The trial commenced on August 10, 2023. Prosecutor Kelly Cunningham presented the timeline. The sleepover, the surveillance footage, the bleach purchase, the crashed car, the recovery location. Yet, the prosecution faced a challenge: a lack of direct physical evidence. No blood or definitive DNA linked Dinkins to Berezier in the car. Defense attorney Chad Fries emphasized this, arguing, "There is not one piece of evidence that shows Henry Dinkins touched this girl. We don't convict people on theories." FBI analysts testified that little evidence directly connected Dinkins to the crime, and forensic experts found no blood on the axe, noting only a single fingerprint on all examined items. The witness testimony began to construct a narrative. Henria Coulter, Dinkins' girlfriend at the time, testified about waking at 3:00 a.m. to find both Berezier and Dinkins gone, and recalled seeing Berezier by the car in her large shirt. Aisha Langford described the frantic morning. Dinkins' claim that Berezier had vanished and his promise to file a report, which he never did. Then came the testimony of D. Berezier's half-brother and Dinkins' son. Now 11. He spoke of going to Credit Island with his father, seeing Dinkins clean a machete with bleach at a motorhome. A machete matching his description was later found there. During cross-examination, D disclosed something previously unmentioned. He witnessed his father shoot someone. Asked why he hadn't said this earlier, he replied quietly, "I didn't speak about it. I hate speaking about it." He added that he had been afraid. When the defense suggested D might exaggerate, his mother testified, "Depends, but not about his sister. He wouldn't lie about that." Judge Latham would later note the profound significance of this young boy's testimony. Prosecutors presented the Walmart surveillance, the discarded phone, and FBI geologists who testified that soil from the Impala's trunk matched the recovery site. Dive team members described retrieving a revolver believed to be the murder weapon from the pond. A crucial link came from the late Jared Brink. His deposition, read into the record after his 2023 passing, described helping pull a maroon Impala from a ditch near where the remains were found. His friend encouraged him to contact police, and GPS data from his phone confirmed his presence there on July 10, 2020. Prosecutors asserted this was the final evidence leading to Dinkins' murder arrest, arguing he assaulted Berezier and killed her to silence her. Facing decades behind bars due to his existing status as a registered sex offender with prior violations, the prosecution posited a grim sequence of events. They believed he removed her from the apartment in the Fairton darkness, likely transporting her to the motorhome where DL later reported seeing him. somewhere in the isolated terrain near DW. He fired the fatal shot. His subsequent actions, they argued, involved a desperate attempt to conceal her body in a pond, an effort to sanitize the scene with bleach, and a car crash resulting from his disorientation in an unfamiliar, pitch-black landscape. The defense dismissed this narrative as pure conjecture, highlighting the absence of concrete forensic proof. They contended the investigation had been myopic ally focused on Dinkins from the start, failing to pursue other leads. They even referenced a separate homicide in Clinton occurring roughly 10 days after Birija vanished, proposing a potential link authorities had overlooked. After 2 weeks of testimony, 47 witnesses, and approximately 70 hours in court, however, a definitive portrait had formed for Judge Lyon. Closing arguments concluded on August 29, 2023, ushering in a period of tense anticipation. The judge promised a ruling as swiftly as possible, though I will illuminated a written decision he asked he approached with deliberate care, deeming the case too significant for haste. On September 15, 2023, the courtroom reconvened, filled with Braz's family adorned in her honorific purple. Judge Lom opted against a simple pronouncement. Given the gravity of the crime, I believe it is crucial to read the decision in its entirety today, he stated. He then meticulously reviewed the evidence, detailed his legal reasoning, and methodically walked through each component of the case before delivering the verdict. Guilty. Guilty of first-degree murder. Guilty of first-degree kidnapping. The room erupted in applause. Aisha Langford was embraced. She later expressed a conflicted relief. I don't know how to feel. It's like winning a lottery where the prize isn't really a prize. Brio is still gone. No ruling can return her to us. Henry Dinkins returned for sentencing on October 11, 2023. Aisha Langford delivered a raw victim impact statement, speaking of her inability to forgive, her sons enduring anger and trauma, and a permanent void within their family. There is no closure here, she declared. There is no justice here. Judge Lom imposed 2 consecutive life sentences without parole, 1 for murder, 1 for kidnapping, citing Dinkins' extensive criminal past and his complete lack of remorse. His history, combined with the horrific nature of his crimes against his own child's sibling, necessitates his permanent removal from society for the protection of the community, the judge affirmed. Henry Dinkins, aged 51, would indeed spend his remaining days in prison. In true crime, the central person can sometimes be overshadowed by procedural details. Beside Terrell was 10. She adored Tkt Kaya and dancing with her mother. She embraced her role as a caring, conscientious big sister. She possessed a radiant, memorable smile and a vibrant spirit. She deserved to grow up to navigate middle school, high school, perhaps college. She deserved first dates, a driver's license, all the ordinary milestones. Instead, her life was stolen on a July night in 2020 by someone entrusted with protecting children, not destroying them. Her family organizes memorial walks and maintains the Brimos adorned with her image, ensuring she is not forgotten. Near DW, close to where her remains were discovered, a memorial stands where people leave flowers and notes. After the verdict, Aisha Langford told reporters she could finally breathe again. He took that from me, she said, to move comfortably and to breathe. Now I can breathe again. Yet she recognizes that breathing and healing are distinct journeys. The trauma of losing a child, the 9-month wait for answers, the years of legal battles, these wounds do not vanish with a verdict. Her younger son, DL, carries the weight of what he witnessed for a lifetime. He lost his sister and, in many ways, his father as well. Such cases underscore vital lessons. They remind us to be vigilant about the individuals in our children's lives and to trust our instincts when something feels amiss. Henriette Kohler's son awoke at 3:00 a.m. with a visceral, sickening fear. She knew immediately that something was wrong. They also highlight community strength. Hundreds searched for Brashe. Volunteers scoured fields and roadsides. People posted flyers, shared information, and clung to hope. Even when hope turned to grief, the community stood united. And they remind us that justice, when it arrives, does not erase the pain or restore what was lost. Yet it holds profound significance. It matters that Henry Dinkins will never harm another child. It matters that Briazia's story was heard, that the truth emerged, that accountability was enforced. If you're growing drowsy, it's all right to rest. But perhaps, before you fully drift away, remember Bri. Remember that 10-year-old girl with the brilliant smile and luminous spirit. Remember the family who loves her still. And if there are children in your life, your own, nieces, nephews, students, neighbors, hold them a little tighter. Be mindful of who to spend time with. Trust your gut. Speak out if something feels wrong. Because every child deserves safety. Every child deserves a childhood to make TikTok videos with a parent. To be a big sister. To simply be a kid. Erasure Terrell deserved all of that. And she is remembered. If you're still listening, feel free to leave your goodnight comment below. I always read them before I sleep. If you haven't yet, please like this video and subscribe so you won't miss our future true crime stories for sleep. Now, let's continue to our third narrative. Story 3. Tonight, I share a true story from the not-so-distant past. Set under the warm sun of Southwest Florida. It's a tale of ambition and dreams, of a woman dedicated to healing, and of how the darkest secrets can be concealed by those closest to us. Take a deep breath. This is the story of Dr. Teresa Severs. Imagine Southwest Florida in 2006. Palm trees sway in the Gulf breeze. Sunlight glints off the sands of Bonita Springs Beach, a haven for those seeking new beginnings and pursuing aspirations. This is what Teresa Severs was doing, chasing a dream. Teresa was a Florida native. She was born on November 19, 1968, in Derby, Connecticut, a tight-knit New England town. Her parents separated when she was just an infant, and she was raised by her mother. From her 6th grade year onward, Teresa's ambition was unwavering. She wanted to be a physician. This was no fleeting childhood fantasy. While other kids outgrew dreams of being astronauts or firefighters, Teresa remained steadfast. In high school, she graduated as valedictorian atop of her class, delivering the commencement speech amid a sea of proud families. She pursued print studies at Fairfield University and earned her medical degree in 1996 from Ross University School of Medicine on the Caribbean island of Dominica. She completed her residency at the University of Florida, where she was honored as Resident of the Year. Her talent wasn't merely competent. It was exceptional. Initially specializing in internal medicine, managing conditions like hypertension and high cholesterol, Teresa gradually filled a void. She believed Western medicine, for all its advances, often missed the holistic picture. She developed a passion for integrative healing, an approach addressing the whole person, not just symptoms. She returned to academia, earning certifications in anti-aging, regenerative, and functional medicine. She even ventured into energy healing, a progressive step for a practicing MD at the time. Her patients cherished her for this. They felt truly heard. She invested time inquiring about their lifestyles, stressors, and emotional health, convinced that illness could stem from unresolved inner turmoil. Her reputation grew, attracting patients from far and wide. Teresa's personal life, however, had its complexities. A previous marriage had ended. Then, in 2003, she met Mark Severs through a mutual friend. Mark, a nurse from Missouri, sparked an immediate connection. They fell in love, married, and welcomed daughters, 2 little girls who would grow up in the Florida sun, enjoying pools, beaches, and the semblance of a perfect life. In 2006, the family relocated to Bonita Springs. Teresa and Mark launched their own practice, the Restorative Health and Healing Center, located nearby in S2. Teresa served as the visionary healer and physician, while Mark managed business operations, scheduling, and cared for their daughters during Teresa's long patient hours. Externally, they epitomized success, a lovely home and a gay community, a thriving practice. To healthy children, the embodiment of the American dream in Southwest Florida. Teresa expanded her reach by starting a YouTube channel, aspiring to share her holistic health philosophy with a broader audience. She dreamed of perhaps hosting a television wellness program one day. "Getting you healthy is my passion," she told her viewers. "Being healthy is your choice." Board certified in both internal and anti-aging medicine, she offered nutritional guidance, weight management, detox programs, and hormone therapy. blending conventional and alternative approaches. Patient testimonials praised her as life-saving, compassionate, and devout, noting how she would pray with them. Yet, as often happens, the exterior facade didn't reveal the full story. Consider Mark. He grew up in Missouri and maintained a lifelong, brotherly friendship with a man named Curtis Wainwright Jr., a bond forged in childhood and enduring despite Curtis' extensive criminal record. By 2015, Teresa and Mark had been married for 12 years. They had 2 daughters, ages 11 and 8. As the girls grew, demanding more time and engagement from both parents, fractures in the marriage began to surface. Neighbors would later inform police of arguments emanating from the Severs home, not minor spats, but intense fights marked by raised voices and slammed doors. Mark was anxious. Rumors suggested he feared Teresa would leave him and take their daughters. He confided in friends that he couldn't financially withstand a custody fight. And there was another pressing issue: money. Although the medical practice was successful, expenses were high. Notably, Mark had secured life insurance policies on Teresa, 5 in total, together worth $4 million. It was a staggering sum, more than many people would ever earn. In the spring of 2015, Mark traveled to Missouri for the wedding of his childhood friend, Curtis Wainwright. During the visit, Mark opened up to Curtis about his marital troubles. He shared that Teresa was threatening to leave, that he dreaded losing his daughters, and that a custody battle would be ruinously expensive. According to later testimony, Curtis presented a single, grim solution: Teresa had to die. Mark agreed, offering to pay Curtis for his help. Plotting began. The insurance payout was also a powerful motivator. $4 million could resolve many problems. Curtis testified that Mark promised him at least $100,000 to carry out the act. Curtis did not intend to act alone. He enlisted Jimmy Ray Rogers, a man he had met while both were incarcerated in Missouri years earlier. Jimmy had his own criminal record. Curtis promised him a share of the payment. On the morning of June 27, 2015, Curtis Wright rented a car in Hillsboro, Missouri. He picked up Jimmy Rogers, and the two began the long drive to Bonita Springs, Florida, a journey of over 1,000 miles. They drove through the day and night, stopping for fuel, restrooms, and snacks, unaware they were etching a digital trail with each pause. Security cameras, rental car GPS data, cell door pings. In the modern era, true disappearance is nearly impossible. Meanwhile, Teresa Severs was with family. She, Mark, and their daughters had traveled to Connecticut to visit Teresa as relatives for her mother's birthday. It was a festive summer visit. However, Teresa had patient appointments scheduled for Monday morning back in Florida and was reluctant to cancel. On Sunday, June 28th, she decided to fly home early. Mark drove her to LaGuardia Airport in New York. Surveillance footage showed them sharing a kiss goodbye at security and ordinary partying. Or so it seemed. Teresa's flight to Southwest Florida International Airport was uneventful. She landed late Sunday night, around 11:30 p.m., captured on airport cameras collecting her suitcase and heading to the parking lot. She appeared weary but content, eager to get home and rest before her busy Monday. The drive from the airport to her Bonita Springs house on Jarvis Road was short. She pulled into her driveway after midnight. Curtis and Jimmy had been waiting for hours. Using information provided by Mark, they had arrived at the Severs home around 6:00 that morning. They disarmed the security system with the code Mark had supplied, then left to wait to pass the time. They visited a local Walmart, where cameras recorded them moving calmly through the aisles. Their purchases were telling: black towels, black shoes, wet wipes, trash bags, and a lock-keeping set supplies for a crime in its aftermath. Afterward, they killed time at a nearby beach before returning to the house after dark to wait. When Teresa's headlights finally appeared, she exited her car, retrieved her suitcase, and walked to her front door. The moment she stepped inside, they ambushed her. The assault was brutal and swift. The medical examiner would later determine she was struck with a hammer 17 times in a ferocious attack that likely killed her within seconds. It happened in her kitchen, a place where she should have been safest. Curtis and Jimmy did not stay long. They took what they needed, attempted to clean up, and left in the Fairton darkness, inadvertently leaving the hammer behind. Believing they had succeeded, they began the long doctor back to Missouri. During the return trip, Curtis instructed Jimmy to discard a blue jumpsuit out the car window along a rural Missouri highway. The next morning, Monday, June 29, Teresa failed to arrive at work. Her concerned staff called repeatedly, then contacted Mark, who was still in Connecticut with the girls. Mark asked a neighbor, Dr. Ritz, Mark Pet Ritz, to check on Teresa. Dr. Ritz found the front door locked. Inside, he discovered Teresa's body on the kitchen floor in a large pool of blood, her head brutally injured, a hammer nearby. Trembling, he called 911. Police responded quickly. The home was sealed as a crime scene. It was immediately clear this was not a botched robbery. A safe containing over $40 Zorro in cash was untouched. This was a targeted personal attack. But who would want Teresa dead? Detectives explored every possibility. Disgruntled patients, her work with at-risk teen mothers, even online conspiracy theories about holistic practitioners being targeted after 2 of the Florida alternative medicine doctors died that same month. No leads yielded results. There was no DNA, no fingerprints. A prosecutor would later call it nearly the perfect crime. For nearly 2 months, the case grew cold. Mark Severs publicly played the role of the grieving husband, holding a funeral where he declared, I wasn't still I'm the luckiest man in the world. But investigators found his demeanor unconvincing. His grief seemed performative. Their suspicion deepened when, hours after the funeral, surveillance showed Mark discarding computer equipment into a dumpster behind the medical office. Initially cooperative, Mark stopped speaking to police entirely after hiring an attorney who's right. But a red flag for detectives. The break came in August 2015. Via a tip from Missouri, an informant stated that Curtis Wainwright had confessed to killing Teresa Severs. Florida detectives investigated Curtis, uncovering his lengthy criminal record and, crucially, his lifelong friendship with Mark Severs. The inquiry expanded to Jimmy Ray Rogers. Digital evidence then converged. GPS data from the rental car outlined the entire Missouri-Florida round trip. Southar records confirmed locations, and security footage from gas stations and Walmart documented the journey and their purchases. Curtis Wainwright and Jimmy Ray Rogers were arrested in Missouri in August 2015 and charged with murder. Police then interviewed Jimmy's girlfriend, Taylor Shoemaker. She revealed Jimmy had confessed, detailing that Mark hired Curtis, who then recruited Jimmy. Motivated by the life insurance money, Taylor directed investigators to a stretch of Highway 47 in Missouri, where she said Jimmy had told her to toss a blue jumpsuit. The garment was recovered. Forensic analysis matched fibers from it to fibers on Teresa's dress. The case against Curtis and Jimmy was strong. But for Mark, the net closed in December 2015, 5 months after the murder, when he was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Authorities believed he was the architect of the plot. Teresa's mother, Mary Ann Groves, was granted custody of the 2 girls. Legal proceedings unfolded slowly over the following years. In 2017, Curtis Wainwright struck a plea deal, agreeing to testify against Jimmy Rogers and Mark Severs in exchange for a reduced sentence. He pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and received a 25-year prison term. In his testimony, Curtis stated that Mark had approached him about killing Teresa, driven by fears of losing custody and a desire for the insurance money, and had promised to pay him $100 or more for the deed. Curtis Wright testified that he and Jimmy Ray Rogers traveled from Missouri to Florida, waited for Teresa Severs to return home, and then bludgeoned her to death with a hammer. Jimmy Ray Rogers faced trial in October 2019. His defense team contended Curtis was lying to shift all blame and secure a lighter sentence for himself, highlighting the absence of Jimmy's DNA at the crime scene. Yet the accumulation of evidence, GPS records, surveillance video, testimony from Taylor Shoemaker, and Curtis on account proved overwhelming. The jury convicted Jimmy Rogers of second-degree murder and trespassing, resulting in a sentence of life imprisonment without parole. Mark Severs' trial commenced in December 2019. The prosecution's case hinged heavily on Curtis Wainwright's testimony. Mark's attorneys worked to discredit Curtis as a witness, emphasizing his initial lies to police and his status as a convicted murderer. However, additional evidence was damning. The computer equipment Mark discarded, his peculiar behavior following Teresa S. death, the life insurance policies he held, GPS and surveillance data placing Curtis and Jimmy in Florida at the time of the murder, and Mark's own recorded statements to Curtis about wanting his wife dead. After deliberation, the jury returned a guilty verdict on December 4, 2019, for first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. On January 3, 2020, Mark Severs was sentenced to death. He proclaimed his innocence before the judge, insisting Teresa was his soulmate, but the court was unmoved. Mark was transferred to Union Correctional Institution in Florida, where he remains on death row. What lingers about this case is its cold calculation. Mark didn't merely desire his wife's death. He engineered physical distance and a solid alibi. He was in Connecticut, performing the role of devoted father to his daughters, while his childhood friend drove over 1,000 miles to brutally end Teresa's life. Teresa's family was shattered. Her mother, Marianne, assumed custody of the two girls, who lost both parents in one horrific act. Teresa's sister expressed the family's profound grief, but also their gratitude that justice was achieved. Digital evidence proved indispensable. Without the GPS data, security footage, and cell tower records tracing the killer's movements, this case might have remained unsolved. Technology, despite its imperfections, was pivotal in delivering three killers to justice. Mark Severs continues to assert his innocence, filing appeals that challenge the admissibility of Curtis' testimony and the fairness of his trial. To date, his conviction and death sentence stand. Curtis Wainwright is serving a 25-year sentence and will be eligible for release one day, though he will be elderly by then. Jimmy Ray Rogers is serving life without parole and has given prison interviews claiming innocence, alleging Curtis was the sole assailant he claimed the jury rejected. Teresa Severs is remembered by her patients, family, and community as a compassionate healer deeply committed to helping others. Her mother established a scholarship in her name to support medical students pursuing careers in holistic and integrative medicine, thus extending Teresa's legacy. This is the story of a woman dedicated to healing, betrayed by the man who vowed to love her, of a meticulously planned murder executed by criminals who believed they could evade capture, and of an investigation that leveraged modern technology to track them down. It's a narrative about greed, fear, and the darkness that emerges when money and control are valued above human life. But it is also Teresa's story, a Connecticut girl who became valedictorian, attended medical school in the Caribbean, built a thriving practice dedicated to wellness, and dreamed of reaching even more people. While she didn't live to fulfill all her dreams, she touched countless lives. Her patients adored her. Her daughters will forever remember her. In this way, her light endures. If you're still listening, feel free to leave a comment sharing where you're tuning in from, the time where you are, or just to let me know you're here. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe so you don't miss the next true crime story. Now, let's proceed to our fourth tale. Story 4. Sometimes the most ordinary moments alter everything. Consider a woman walking her dog on a cold January morning in 2016, the kind of morning where breath turns to mist and the world feels hushed, almost sacred. She followed a familiar trail through West Bank State Park in Ohio, near Highway 127, when her dog halted, sniffing intently near Coldwater Creek. At first, she thought it was a fallen branch. The woods there are dense, places where nature slowly reclaims all things. But as she approached, she realized the object wasn't wood. It was bone. Human bone. The woman called the authorities, her hands likely trembling as she dialed. And with that, a mystery began, one that would take nearly 6 years to unravel. Weaving through lives connected by the internet, desire, and choices that spiraled into something dark and irreversible. Let's rewind to the beginning, not to that January morning, but to a young man named Ryan Zimmerman, living in Corbin, Kentucky, with his family. By all accounts, he was gentle, loved video games, and spent hours on his computer immersed in alternate worlds. He was close with his younger brother, the kind of older sibling who made time to play and talk. His family knew him as quiet, thoughtful, perhaps a bit shy. Yet, Like many young people, Ryan was searching, trying to understand who he was and where he belonged. He explored his identity online, asking questions about sexuality and gender that he might not have voiced aloud. In the spring of 2015, Ryan did what millions do. He posted an ad on Craigslist. In the since removed personal section, he sought connection, someone who might understand his journey. The ad was explicit about his curiosities and desires. A response came from a screen name, Laurel Emerson. They began talking via email, then Google Hangouts. The conversations grew increasingly intimate and detailed. Laurel seemed to comprehend Ryan in a way few did. They discussed desires, identities, and possibilities. Eventually, Laurel extended an invitation. Come to Columbus. Live with me. Explore who you truly are. Ryan agreed, but the internet holds illusions. Behind every screen name is a person, and sometimes that person isn't who they appear to be. Laurel Emerson was a digital persona, a mask worn by a man named Corey Buzzard. Corey was married to a woman named Sarah. In the summer of 2015, they lived at the Skyview Townhomes in Columbus, Ohio. Corey and Sarah's marriage was unconventional. They had opened their relationship in ways they believed worked. When Corey met Ryan online, he saw an opportunity, a young, searching individual willing to explore. He invited Ryan to join their lives, to live with them, and to engage in an intimate relationship with them. On August 6, 2015, Ryan packed his belongings and drove from Corbin, Kentucky, to Columbus, Ohio. Imagine that moment, the nervous excitement, the hope. He was 21, driving toward what he envisioned as a new life, a new self. Upon arrival, the situation was more complex than anticipated. Corey and Sarah weren't alone. A third person, a woman named Nara Whitaker, had moved in just a month earlier. In July, Nara was in a relationship with Sarah. Thus, the apartment housed for individuals within a delicate web of connections and intimacies. For the initial weeks, the arrangement seemed functional. Ryan was with Corey. Sarah was with Nara. Each had a role in this unconventional dynamic. But such setups are fragile, reliant on constant communication and maintained boundaries. When they fracture, the collapse is severe. By late September, a shift occurred. Corey changed his mind about Ryan. Whatever connection or agreement existed, Corey no longer wanted it. He told Ryan to leave, to pack and find somewhere else to go. Ryan's last communication with his Kentucky family was on September 25, 2015. It was an ordinary conversation, nothing hinting at turmoil, no final goodbye. Just mundane exchange, the kind that gains significance only in hindsight. That same weekend, September 25, 27, Corey Buzzard checked into the downtown Hyatt Regency Hotel with a visitor from Athens, Ohio. He left the apartment, leaving Sarah, Nara, and Ryan together. Now, consider Sarah Buzzard. She was 30, originally from Marion, Indiana. To her former neighbors, she was sweet and friendly, the last person you'd be suspect of violence. Yet people contain multitudes, both light and shadow. Sarah had her own committed relationship with Nara, one that perhaps reflected a bond Corey and Sarah's marriage no longer held. When Corey demanded Ryan's departure, something twisted within Sarah. She later told investigators she blamed Ryan for ruining her marriage, that she and Corey argued constantly about him, viewing Ryan as the intruder causing their collapse, a common reflex, blaming an outsider for precising fractures. While Corey was at the hotel, Ryan pleaded with Sarah, asking if he could stay or if they could resolve the situation. Sarah refused. "You're a year for Corey, not for me," she said. "Corey wants you gone, so you need to leave." Sarah then discussed this with Nara. In that conversation between the two women, a terrible, vital plan took shape. The precise chronology of subsequent events comes from Sarah's confession years later, after her arrest. She stated that when Ryan emerged from the bathroom, she knocked him down, placed him in a chokehold, and held him as he struggled, lost consciousness, and then crucially she maintained her grip long after he went still, long after any chance of revival was gone. During the early hours of September 27, Someone using Sarah's Gmail account searched for the word jugular, a single word typed into Google, seemingly innocuous alone but chilly in context. Ryan Zimmerman died in that Columbus apartment, strangled by someone who blamed him for her own unhappiness. The decision to end a life rather than request a departure. Yet, the murder was merely the opening act. What followed was a nightmare that would haunt detectives for years. In the apartment's bathtub, Sarah and Nair dismembered Ryan's body. Saws grated against bone, they reduced him to transportable portions, designed for concealment and disposal. The remnants of Ryan were loaded into Sarah's 2007 Toyota Corolla. Then, they began to drive. Their first stops were multiple Columbus gas stations, where fragments of Ryan were tossed into public trash bins. Envision that ritual, pulling into a lit station at night, discarding it, and driving away, only to repeat the act. Afterwards, they traveled west out of the city, exhaustion set in by Mercer County, Ohio. They pulled off near West Bank State Park, in the woods by Coldwater Creek, and abandoned the bulk of Ryan's remains. They left him there, strewn among the trees and brush. When Corey returned from his hotel weekend, Sarah and Nair claimed Ryan had packed up and left. Corey believed them. Why question it? People come and go. Plans shift. Life continues. 2 days later, on September 27, Columbus police impounded Ryan's abandoned car. His father got a retrieval notice. He called Ryan. No answer. He called again. Silence. On November 17, 2015, Ryan's parents filed a missing person report. Their son had vanished without a trace. In January 2016, weeks after that report was filed, a woman walking her dog in West Bank State Park watched as her pet uncovered a bone. An investigation launched, but without a skull, no dental records or fingerprints identifying the victim seemed few. Forensic experts extracted DNA from the bones, running it through every database. The federal CODIS system, the National Missing and Unidentified Persons Database. No matches emerged. They searched for other skeletal remains in the region. Nothing. Meanwhile, Sarah and Nair's lives progressed. In November 2015, Sarah and Corey filed for divorce. By January 2016, the very month the bones were found, their divorce was final. Less than 2 weeks later, Sarah married Nair Whitaker. They wed in Indiana, found jobs, and settled in as the friendly new neighbors. They were the couple who would wave, make small talk about the weather, and blend seamlessly into suburbia. No one suspected a thing. Years drifted by. The bones in Mercer County were nameless. Ryan was still missing. His parents clung to hope, tormented by the agonizing not knowing that follows a disappearance. The case might have remained frozen forever if not for criminal intelligence analyst Jennifer Lester. In 2020, while reviewing Columbus missing persons files, she found Ryan's. She spotted a critical oversight. His family SDN had never been submitted. One samples were obtained from Ryan's parents in Kentucky and matched to the Mercer County bones. The puzzle locked into place. After over 4 years, Ryan Zimmerman finally had his name back. But naming the victim was just the beginning. Detectives now needed his killer. They delved into Ryan's life, especially his digital footprint. They secured warrants for social media companies, tech firms, and email providers, some platforms so obscure the sheriff confessed HED never heard of them. The digital trail rewound time. They uncovered conversations between Ryan and someone calling themselves Laurel Emerson. This led them to Corey Buzzard. They alerted Ryan had moved to Columbus, living in that apartment with Corey, Sarah, and Nair. Location data from Corey's Gmail placed him at the downtown Hyatt Regency the weekend Ryan vanished. They found Sarah's Google search for jugular in the early hours of September 27. They located Sarah's old Toyota Corolla. It had been sold and resold, but they tracked it down. The current owner cooperated. Forensic analysis of the car revealed traces of human blood. A search of the Columbus apartment yielded more blood evidence. The pieces were converging. By July 2021, over 5 years after the bones were discovered, investigators were ready. On August 25, 2021, detectives coordinated simultaneous actions across 3 states. Some went to Indiana to arrest Sarah Buzzard. Others in Columbus detained Nair Whitaker for questioning. A witness was interviewed in Oak Island, North Carolina, all synchronized to prevent any warning. In custody at the Marion Police Department, Sarah confessed. She recounted the entire story, how she killed Ryan, blaming him for her failing marriage, how she and Nara dismembered his body and dispersed it across Ohio. She spoke of the anger, the arguments with Corey about Ryan, her conviction that Ryan had ruined her life, though the fractures in her marriage had long predated him. Meanwhile, back in Indiana, 5 deputies approached the home where Nara Whitaker was staying. Confronted about Ryan's death, Nara reached into her bag, withdrew a handgun, and before anyone could intervene, shot herself in the head. She died at the scene. Neighbors were stunned. These were the sweet women who lived on their street for years, friendly, normal, the kind who made the neighborhood feel safe. No one was under arrest for murder. The other dead by suicide. Sarah Buzzard faced 18 felony charges, 2 counts of aggravated murder, 2 counts of murder, kidnapping, assault, evidence tampering, grand theft auto, abuse of a corpse. The list was extensive. She faced the death penalty. In December 2021, Sarah accepted a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to 1 count of aggravated murder in exchange for dismissing the other charges and removing the death penalty. The agreed sentence was life in prison with parole eligibility after 30 years. At her sentencing hearing on January 20th, 2022, Sarah addressed the court. She called herself a flawed person, stated that not a day passed without her wishing she couldn't do it all, accepted responsibility for Ryan's death, and vowed to spend her life seeking redemption through positive actions. Prosecutor Matthew Fox challenged this. He noted that everyone is flawed. We all make mistakes and have regrets. But Sarah alone in that courtroom had committed aggravated murder. Flaws do not excuse taking a life. Judge Jeffrey Ingram imposed the sentence. Life with parole possible after 30 years. She is now serving that term. She will be eligible for parole in 2052, at age 60. Ryan Zimmerman's family finally had answers. After years of uncertainty, hoping, and imagining every scenario, they knew their son's fate. It was not the answer they wanted, but it was an answer. Some of Ryan's remains were never recovered. His head, his limbs, severed at the joints, they are still out there. Perhaps in Columbus dumpsters or landfills. Perhaps scattered in places no one will ever see. Ryan's body was partitioned, parceled out across Ohio as if he were nothing. As if his life meant nothing. But his life did mean something. He was a son, a brother, a young man navigating a complicated world, trying to understand himself. He chose to trust someone he met online, to believe in the potential for connection. That choice should not have cost him his life. There is a distinctly modern element to this case. It originated online anonymous screen names, digital dialogues, person is masking reality. Ryan sought community, acceptance, understanding. He found predators instead. Not Corey. The investigation never implicated him in the murder. He was away when it happened, believing the lie that Ryan had simply left. But Sarah and Nara decided Ryan's life was expendable, that their love justified murder, that solving their problem required erasing a person. Sarah blamed Ryan for her divorce. The truth was, her marriage was already crumbling. Ryan didn't cause it. He was merely present, a convenient scapegoat for precisely dysfunction. And when Corey no longer wanted him there, instead of letting him leave, Sarah chose to ensure he would never leave at all, not the apartment, not Columbus, not this life. The quest for identity that led Ryan to that online ad, that brought him to Columbus, also made him vulnerable to those who saw him as a problem to eliminate, not a person to value. It is heartbreaking. He was 21, his entire future ahead of him. Sometimes I think of that woman walking her dog on that January morning in 2016. An ordinary moment of enjoying nature with her pet transformed into something unforgettable. Finding a human bone, triggering an investigation that would take years to unravel. I think of Ryan's parents filing that missing person report in November 2015, hoping for their son's return, waiting for a call that never came, only to receive the worst news years later. I think of the investigators who worked this case for 5.5 years. Who never gave up, the analysts who noticed the missing family DNA, the detectives who served warrants on obscure tech firms, who traced digital footprints across the internet, who painstakingly assembled the truth. And I think of Sarah Buzzard in prison now, saying she wishes she could take it all back. Perhaps she does. Perhaps that remorse is genuine. But wishes do not resurrect Ryan. Apologies do not reverse strangulation. Regret does not reassemble a dismembered and scattered body. There is a lesson here about the perils of the internet, the risks of meeting strangers online. Yet that feels insufficient. Millions connect online daily, forming genuine bonds, relationships, and communities. The internet is not the evil. The evil resided in Sarah's choices. The choice to kill instead of asking someone to go. The choice to dismember a body. The choice to lie. To conceal. To continue living as if nothing occurred. In those choices, we witness the darkness people can embrace when they prioritize their own comfort, desires, and narrative over another person's fundamental right to exist. Ryan Zimmerman wanted to explore his identity. He wanted acceptance. He wanted to live authentically. He should have been allowed that. He should have been safe. Instead, he became fragments scattered across Ohio, reduced to evidence in a case that took years to solve. As this account concludes, remember Ryan, not as a victim, not as remains discovered in a park, but as a person. A young man who enjoyed video games, who played with his little brother, who was striving to understand himself, who chose bravery, who sought connection, who moved towards something new. He deserved far better than what he received. You deserve security, to be acknowledged, to be cherished. And Sarah Buzzard must face the consequences of her actions. To spend years in a cell, replaying the moment she locked Ryan in that chokehold and refused to release him. The moment she chose to kill. The moment she decided her own comfort outweighed another human life. That is the narrative. A tragedy forged in the digital era. Born from tangled connections and irreversible decisions. A testament that behind every missing person is a family in waiting. Behind every unsolved file is a detective who won't quit. And behind every crime is a victim who must never fade from memory. Ryan Zimmerman, age 21. Taken too soon, but forever remembered. If you're still with me, let's proceed to our final account. Story 5. Tonight, we delve into a mystery that required 13 years to unravel. A puzzle that started in a field of berries and concluded with justice spanning oceans. This is the tale of Robert Caraballo. For more than 10 years known only as Jack in the Box. There's a serenity to Michigan's blueberry fields. In spring, they lay in orderly lines, the plants stirring from winter's sleep. The earth is deep and fertile, the air holding the special stillness unique to farming country. It was in such a field on May 8, 2002, that a farmer named Gordon Deere stumbled upon a discovery that would shadow investigators for over a decade. Gordon was inspecting his land that morning, steering his truck along the dirt paths weaving through his blueberry bushes near Grand Haven Township. This was terrain he knew intimately, every tree and meadow as familiar as his own home. But as he passed a scrubby, wooded patch, something snagged his attention, something out of place. At first, his mind struggled to comprehend the sight. Sometimes our brains reject what lies too far beyond the ordinary. He drove on, but the image persisted. Doubling back, his eyes confirmed what his instincts had resisted. There, partly concealed in the underbrush, sat a severely scorched metal footlocker. Inside and around it lay the burned remains of a person. Nearby trees were blackened. The ground bore signs of fierce heat. Someone had tried to obliterate a person from existence, to reduce them to ash and enigma in this tranquil stretch of Michigan farmland. When the Ottawa County Sheriff's Office reached the scene, they confronted a puzzle with scarcely any pieces. The body was so severely burned that identification seemed a distant hope. The extreme heat had erased most distinguishing features. No wallet, no ID, no easy answers, only the remains of someone violently killed and then burned to conceal the crime. The victim was male, that much was clear. Forensic analysis showed death resulted from blunt force trauma to the head. This was no accident. This was murder. Brutal and intentional. But who was he? That question would resonate for years. The investigators gave him a name, because everyone deserves an identity. Even in death, they called him Jack. And because of where he was discovered in that footlocker in the woods, the case was dubbed Jack in the Box. Detective Robert Donker headed the investigation. He was meticulous, systematic, the kind of detective who misses nothing. He pursued the case relentlessly, tracking every lead, exploring every angle. They scoured missing persons reports across multiple states. They analyzed dental records. They contacted other agencies. Yet every potential lead dissolved like fog at dawn. The challenge with an unidentified victim is that without a name, you lack a beginning. You cannot know where they lived, who they knew, or why someone might have wished them dead. You are assembling a puzzle without knowing the final image. Months became years. The case file expanded but brought no resolution. Jack remained a mystery. He was eventually laid to rest in Lakeshore Cemetery in Grand Haven Township under a plain marker bearing no name. The burial was funded by donations from officers, a small token of respect for a man no one could name. By 2005, Detective Donker knew he needed a new approach. Conventional methods had led to a dead end. So he contacted Hope College and a professor named David Schock, who taught documentary filmmaking. The concept was straightforward yet unprecedented. Create a documentary about the case and release it publicly. Perhaps someone, somewhere, would watch it and recognize something. Maybe Jack's family was out there, wondering about a loved one's fate. Professor Schock and his students dedicated themselves to the project. The Ottawa County Sheriff's Office granted them extraordinary access. They filmed at the crime scene, studied the evidence, interviewed investigators. They even included autopsy photos and crime scene footage, holding nothing back. The resulting 52-minute documentary was raw, unsettling, but comprehensive. It was titled simply Jack in the Box. The documentary was released and posted online, where it resided quietly on the internet, waiting for the right person to find it, waiting for someone with knowledge. Meanwhile, roughly 105 miles away in Charlotte, Michigan, a small town in Eden County, life continued. A young girl named Cicely Caraballo was growing up. She was 9 years old in 2002, the year her father vanished. One day he was present, the next he was gone. Her mother, Beverly McCall Lum, told Cicely that her father, Roberto Caraballo, had left them. He had returned to Canada, to his former life. He had abandoned them. That is what Cicely was told, and what she attempted to believe, even as years passed without a call, a letter, or an attempt to see her. Roberto, who sometimes went by Robert, was 37 when he disappeared. He had a troubled history, including time in federal prison, a life that had not always followed his plans. But he loved his daughter and had been striving for a fresh start. In 2002, released from federal prison, he moved in with Beverly and her family at their home on Horatio Street in Charlotte. Beverly was his wife, though theirs was not a happy union. She had 2 daughters from prior relationships, Donnie and Duck Sharon, aged 21 in 2002, and Cicely, aged 9. Beverly had a friend, a man named Christopher McMillan, then 25. He was close with Donnie and was frequently at the house on Horatio Street. According to later court testimony, Beverly no longer wanted Roberto around. In the prosecutor's words, he was cramping her lifestyle. Beverly wished to continue her way of living, which allegedly involved drugs and activities that Roberto, now trying to reform, disapproved of. His presence was an inconvenience. He had served his time, paid his debt, and was ready to be a father to Cicely, to be part of a family. But Beverly had other plans. The spring of 2002 was when everything unfolded. The precise date remains uncertain, but it was early May, just days before Gordon Deere would make his grim discovery in the blueberry fields. Christopher McMillan would later testify, after accepting a plea deal, about the events. He stated the killing was planned. They had even conducted a rehearsal, practicing their actions. This was not a crime of passion or a sudden outburst. It was premeditated murder. According to McMillan's testimony, it occurred in the basement of the house on Horatio Street. The details are harrowing. Beverly allegedly pushed Roberto down the basement stairs first. Then, as he lay dazed or injured from the fall, she struck him with a hammer. The assault was so ferocious that the hammer became embedded in his skull. Yet even that was not the end. While Roberto still breathed, still clung to life. Beverly placed a plastic bag over his head and suffocated him. Don Ducharme, Beverly's eldest daughter, was also involved. McMillan testified that both Beverly and Don participated in the killing, a family affair in the most sinister meaning of the phrase. Through all this, young Cicely was elsewhere in the house. She would later testify to recalling being placed in her father's van that night, though she did not understand why. The adults were going for a drive, and she was joining them. She did not know her father's body was with them in the vehicle, concealed within that metal footlocker. They drove across Michigan from Charlotte to Ottawa County, to a remote location near a blueberry field that Beverly or another knew. They carried the footlocker into the woods, doused it with accelerant, and set it ablaze, attempting to destroy the evidence, to erase Roberto Caraballo from the world as if he had never existed. Then they drove home. They cleaned up. They changed the vehicle's tires to avoid matching any tracks. They discarded their shoes. They resumed their lives and told Cicely her father had left them. And the years passed slowly for Cicely. She grew up believing her father had abandoned her, that she was not worth staying for. Such a belief molds a person, leaving scars invisible to the eye. She turned 10, then 12, then 15. Her father's absence was a constant in her life. It was not until around 2015, when Cicely was in her early 20s, that she finally confronted her mother. She demanded the truth about her father's fate. Where had he truly gone? Why had he never contacted her? Beverly's story had shifted by then. According to Cicely's later testimony, Beverly recounted a version blending truth with falsehoods. She claimed she had hit Roberto with a crowbar, that a fight had ensued, and then Diane and her friends had gone to the basement and completed the killing. It was a narrative crafted to minimize Beverly's role, to suggest she was less involved than she truly was. But at last, Cicely knew. Her father had not abandoned her. He had been murdered. He had been stolen from her. And that knowledge, however agonizing, also brought a certain relief. The deepest pain of being left is questioning your own worth. Now Cicely understood it had nothing to do with her. Yet here is the extraordinary part. Around that same time, in the spring of 2015, someone else was uncovering the truth. Someone had found Professor Schock's documentary online. Perhaps they were browsing late at night, falling into an internet rabbit hole. Perhaps they were intentionally searching for information on missing persons. However it happened, they watched Jack in the Box, and a connection sparked. They contacted Detective Dunker. They had information. They believed they might know Jack's identity. The tip was pursued instantly, after 13 years of silence. Finally, a breakthrough. Roberto Caraballo's family members were reached. Dental records were compared. DNA was tested. And then, after all those years, after more than a decade of being nameless, Jack regained his identity. He was Roberto H. Alejandro Caraballo. He had been 37 years old when he died. He had a daughter who had never ceased wondering about him. He had a family who had never learned his fate. And now, at last, they had answers. Not the answers anyone desires, but answers all the same. Once the victim had a name, the investigation was reborn. Detective Donker collaborated with Detective James Malty of the Eaton County Sheriff's Office. Their investigation into Roberto's disappearance led them to Charlotte, specifically to a residence on Horatio Street. It was in the basement of that home where they uncovered crucial evidence that had remained there silently, preserving its account of events. Forensic experts confirmed Roberto had been killed in that very basement, the place he had called home with his wife and children. The investigative team constructed their case meticulously. They conducted witness interviews and reconstructed the sequence of events. By 2019, 17 years after Roberto's death, they were prepared to make arrests. Christopher McMillan was apprehended in Grand Rapids. Diane Desarme was taken into custody in Texas, where she had been residing. Beverly McCallum was missing. Investigators concluded she had fled to Pakistan soon after family interviews began. Sensing the net was tightening and her long-held secrets were unraveling, Beverly McCallum lived discreetly in Pakistan, attempting to avoid detection. In February 2020, she and her teenage son registered at a hotel on the outskirts of Rome, Italy. Italian hotels are required to log all guests into an online database linked to police systems. When Beverly S. name was input, it triggered a match with an Interpol arrest warrant. Rome police were alerted, and Beverly McCallum was arrested. 18 years after her husband's murder, after a life of freedom while Roberto lay in an unmarked grave and their daughter Cicely grew up believing herself abandoned, consequences finally arrived. Extradition from European nations can be complex. The Italian government set conditions. They would only extradite Beverly if the United States agreed not to pursue a first-degree murder charge, due to Italy's opposition to life sentences without parole. Following protracted negotiations, an agreement was reached to charge Beverly with second-degree murder. She remained in Italy for over 2 years during legal proceedings. Finally, in July 2022, Beverly McCallum was extradited to Michigan. She was taken into custody at Grand Rapids Airport and formally charged with second-degree murder and the disinterment and mutilation of a body. The trials of her co-defendants had already concluded. Christopher McMillan had accepted a plea agreement, pleading guilty to second-degree murder and agreeing to testify against Beverly and Diane. In exchange, he received a prison sentence of 15 to 40 years. His cooperation and testimony about the basement events were pivotal to the case. Diane and Ducharme, Beverly's daughter, stood trial in 2021. She was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. She was 21 when she participated in her stepfather's killing and in her 40s when finally held accountable. Beverly McCallum's trial commenced in Charlotte, Michigan, in March 2020 for 22 years after the murder. The courtroom was filled with observers seeking justice and resolution to this decades-old story. Eaton County Prosecutor Doug Lloyd presented the case systematically. He called Christopher McMillan to the stand, who provided a chillingly detailed testimony of the planning, the rehearsal, and the murder itself. He described how Beverly pushed Roberto down the stairs, struck him with a hammer, and suffocated him with a plastic bag while he was still alive. The defense challenged McMillan's credibility, highlighting his status as a convicted murderer who had secured a reduced sentence through a deal. They contended Beverly had been coerced, was fearful, and only assisted in disposing of the body under duress, not in the actual killing. Then the prosecution presented a key witness, Cicely Carabao. Now in her 30s, Cicely had lived most of her life not knowing her father's fate, followed by years knowing he was murdered but seeing no justice. She testified, facing the mother who had killed her father and deceived her for over a decade. Cicely's testimony was damning. She recounted conversations with her mother, including when Beverly admitted to hitting Roberto with a crowbar. She contradicted Beverly's claims that the injuries inflicted were minor and refuted her mother's assertion of not recognizing certain tools. Cicely's account clearly demonstrated Beverly's deeper involvement. The jury foreman later stated Cicely's testimony was decisive. A daughter who had every reason to wish for her mother's innocence instead chose truth, even at the cost of their relationship. Beverly McCallum testified in her own defense. A risky strategy. She portrayed herself as a victim, planning coercion and fear for her daughter's safety from Christopher and Diane. Prosecutor Lloyd countered that her narrative was illogical. If she truly feared for her children, why did she not leave after the body was disposed of? Why remain with these allegedly dangerous individuals? Lloyd argued the true motive was simpler. Roberto was an obstacle to Beverly's desired lifestyle. His attempts to reform and be a good father conflicted with her plans, leading her to enlist her daughter and her daughter's friend to plan and carry out the murder. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. On April 1, 2024, they returned a verdict, guilty on both counts. Beverly McCallum was convicted of second-degree murder and the disinterment and mutilation of a body. She showed no visible reaction as the verdict was read, sitting silently. Sentencing was set for May 23, 2024. On that day, the courtroom was again full. Beverly arrived in a wheelchair, though whether due to genuine health issues or a bid for sympathy was unclear. Cicely Carabao delivered a victim impact statement. She spoke of her father, taken from her at age 9, of growing up feeling abandoned, and of the resulting trauma. Addressing her mother directly, she stated that despite Beverly's malice in her parenting, Cicely had become a good and strong person, an achievement Beverly could not claim. Cicely also requested any case restitution be directed to assist other children of murdered parents. transforming her pain into potential aid for others. Judge Janice Cunningham was unequivocal in her sentencing remarks. She labeled Beverly McElum a danger to anyone who crossed her, citing a trial moment where Beverly leaned toward courtroom monitors to scrutinize autopsy photos of her deceased husband, a detached tact that unsettled all who saw it. The sentence was 40 to 60 years in prison. At 63 years old, even with parole eligibility, Beverly would be over a century old before potential release, effectively a life sentence. Thus, the story concludes, though without the healing closure that might undo the past. Roberto Carballo remains lost to his family. Cicely grew up without a father. Those years are irreplaceable, yet justice holds value, the truth emerging, the accountable facing consequences. The case demanded the dedication of multiple detectives across more than 2 decades. Detectives Dunker and Maltby had retired before its resolution, but their work established the foundation. Sergeant Josh Ivey steered it to completion, ensuring every evidentiary piece was secured. Professor David Schock's documentary, an unconventional step to publicize the case, proved instrumental. Without it, the tip identifying Roberto might never have arrived, and Jack might have remained nameless indefinitely. It underscores that solving cases sometimes requires unconventional approaches and risks with untried methods. Roberto Caraballo, who spent 13 years known only as Jack in the Box, now lies under his own name near Lakeshore Cemetery. His family knows his resting place. His daughter understands his fate. The uncertainty has ended, replaced by grief, but also by knowledge, and knowledge, however painful, surpasses endless speculation. Beverly McElum is in prison for life. Diane Dessum serves life without parole. Christopher McMillan has at least 15 years remaining on his sentence. Those responsible for Roberto's death have been held accountable. Even after 22 years, Cicely Caraballo continues her life, bearing the weight of history but not allowing it to break her. She faced her mother in court, spoke her truth, and honored her father's memory by ensuring he was not forgotten, a courage difficult to measure. The house on Horatio Street in Charlotte still stands, now occupied by other families unaware of the basement's past. The blueberry field where Roberto's body was discovered yields its harvest each summer. Life persists, flowing around tragedy like water around a stone. Yet one can envision Detective Donker in the case's early days, reviewing the Jack in the Box file, vowing to uncover the victim's identity. One can picture Professor Schock and his students editing their documentary, hoping someone would watch and come forward. One can imagine Cicely as a child, wondering why her father never called, visited, or celebrated her birthdays. There is solace in the eventual revelation of truth. It took 13 years to name the victim and another 9 to bring all responsible to justice. But it was achieved. The system operated slowly and imperfectly, yet it functioned. Roberto Caraballo mattered. His life, his death, and the pursuit of justice on his behalf mattered. In a world that can seem random and chaotic, this carries profound significance. The individuals who worked this case over decades, through retirements and career shifts, never forgot Jack. They never ceased their efforts, and ultimately, they succeeded. This is the story of Roberto Caraballo's murder, a narrative of betrayal and violence, but also of persistence and dedication. It reminds us that some devote their lives to seeking justice for strangers, simply because it is right. Thank you for listening to tonight's true crime account. Rest assured, another story awaits next time. I'm here to walk with you again on the path to peaceful rest. If your eyes are still open, please remember to show your support and join our community, so you're always here for our next mysterious tale. Until we meet again, look after yourself and be well. Sleep soundly.